Malin had always known she was different. In a village where every child carried the spark of shifting in their blood, she remained untouched by the gift. Other children howled at the moon when their voices first cracked, their eyes glimmering with the colors of their inner beasts. Malin only stared at her reflection in the stream, seeing nothing but her own pale face and dark hair, unchanged, unremarkable. Her family's shame pressed down on her shoulders heavier than any chain. Her father Halvar was once respected as a seasoned warrior, but whispers of his defective daughter followed him into the market square. Her mother, frail and exhausted, rarely spoke above a murmur, and Rhine, her younger sister, avoided Malin's gaze entirely, as if merely being seen with her cursed sibling would rob her of her rightful destiny. The truth was crueler still. Malin was not only powerless, but barren. The healers had declared her womb as lifeless soil, incapable of carrying the future of their kind. In a society built upon bloodlines, heirs, and strength, she was branded useless before she reached womanhood. The villagers did not need to banish her. They simply forgot her. Invitations never came. Smiles never reached her. To them, she was a ghost wandering in daylight. That ghostly existence ended the day Garrick arrived. The pounding of hooves on frozen earth shook the walls of their cottage. When the door burst open, a figure filled the threshold, tall, broad, clad in blackened armor that gleamed with menace. Garrick, the beta of the Dark Alpha King, carried himself like a storm caged inside a man. His golden eyes flickered across the cramped room, pausing first on Halvar, then sweeping to Malin. "You owe the crown," he said, his voice sharp as a blade. "And payment is due tonight." Her father stammered, offering what few coins he had, but Garrick's gaze had already landed on her. "She will come," he declared. Malin's breath froze in her chest. She tried to step back, but the cottage wall caught her spine. Her father protested weakly, but Garrick silenced him with a glance that promised ruin. No one argued with the king's beta, not when the king himself was said to be a monster cloaked in shadows, cursed to stalk the night as a beast. The chains that bound her wrists bit into skin as Garrick dragged her outside. Snowflakes clung to her hair, melting into icy rivulets down her neck. The village watched in silence as she was thrown onto the back of a waiting horse. No one moved to help. No one whispered her name. As they rode into the forest, Malin's mind raced. She had heard the stories of King Corvin, the Dark Alpha, who had claimed the throne with bloodshed and fire. They said he ruled with merciless claws, that he devoured those who defied him, and now she, powerless and barren, was being delivered into his hands like a sacrificial lamb. The night deepened, and the trees grew thick around them, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. Hours passed before they reached the looming silhouette of the king's fortress. Black stone rose against the stars, jagged and cold, a beast made of walls and towers. Flames licked at the iron gates as they swung open with a groan. Inside, the air carried a weight that pressed down on Malin's lungs. Garrick dismounted, yanked her to the ground, and dragged her through corridors lined with flickering torches. The further they walked, the more oppressive the silence grew, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. Finally, they entered a vast hall. At the far end, upon a throne of dark steel, sat the king himself, Corvin. His presence devoured the room. His eyes glowed faintly in the shadows, too sharp, too unnatural. His frame was broad, draped in black furs that could not disguise the raw power coiled beneath. Even seated, he seemed ready to strike like a predator barely leashed. Malin's knees threatened to buckle, but she forced herself to stand to meet his gaze. "She is barren," Garrick announced, shoving her forward. "And powerless. No family claims her. She will not be missed." For a moment, silence reigned. Then the king rose. The sound of his boot striking stone echoed through the hall as he descended the steps. Each step was measured deliberate, as though he savoured the fear that rippled through her body. When he stopped before her, the air itself seemed to shiver. Corvin's hand rose rough fingers, tilting her chin upward. She flinched, but did not pull away. His eyes, glowing like molten silver, pierced through her soul. "Powerless," he murmured, voice low and dangerous. "And yet, you do not cower, like the others." Her lips trembled, but words refused to form. A faint, wolfish smile curved his mouth, one that held no warmth. "Very well. You will stay. Whether you survive, that is yet to be seen." The hall trembled as the great doors slammed shut behind her. For Malin there was no going back. They did not take her through the grand corridors lined with banners or gold, but through a narrow, damp passage that smelled of stone and iron. The torches sputtered there, smoke curling like restless spirits. Malin's wrists ached from Garrick's grip as he dragged her forward until they reached a low iron-banded door. He knocked once. A woman opened it, framed by shelves of folded linens and bundles of herbs. Her hair was the grey of ash, her expression sharp as a blade dulled from use, but never truly harmless. "New one," Garrick announced. The woman's eyes travelled over Malin, lingering on her thin frame, on the bruises where chains had rubbed raw. She said nothing at first, then turned to Garrick with an expression that did not waver. "Unshackle her. The king dislikes his possessions looking like prisoners." Garrick's jaw ticked, but he obeyed, removing the iron links from Malin's wrists. His fingers lingered longer than needed, pressing down into her skin, as if branding her with the reminder of who had brought her here. "Try not to lose this one," he muttered darkly. "His Majesty grows impatient." The woman Mistress Hestia, as Malin would later learn, snapped her fingers. "Out!" When the door closed behind Garrick, the chamber seemed to breathe again. The silence that followed was no gentler, but it lacked the suffocating weight of his presence. Hestia studied Malin once more, then handed her a folded tunic of coarse linen. "You will wash. The king does not tolerate the scent of fear or filth lingering near his hall." Malin's throat was dry, her voice weak from disuse. "And if I refuse?" The woman gave a short, humourless laugh. "Then you will not live to see dawn." The baths were carved into the stone itself, deep pools fed by underground springs. Steam rose in lazy curls, blurring the air. Malin lowered herself into the water, the heat searing her skin before sinking into her bones. For the first time since leaving her village, the ache in her limbs eased. She washed quickly, though, for the walls seemed to watch her, the silence broken only by the distant echo of something heavy dragging across stone. When she emerged, dressed in the plain tunic, Hestia was waiting. She pressed a thin strip of cloth into Malin's hands, a head covering. "Do not let your hair fall across your eyes when you stand before him," she warned. "He despises weakness, and trembling women most of all." Malin bit back the urge to ask what then was she doing here. Instead, she followed Hestia through winding staircases until they reached a small chamber lit only by a single torch. "This will be yours," the older woman said. A bed of straw, a wooden stool, and a narrow slit of a window greeted her. "You will serve as needed. You will survive if you learn quickly." "And if I don't?" Malin whispered. "Then the curse will have one more mouth to silence." Hestia's tone was flat, but the words sent a shiver racing down Malin's spine. That night sleep would not come. The fortress seemed alive, groaning as if something vast moved within its bones. She pressed her ear to the cold stone wall and heard the scrape of claws against flagstone far below, a sound too deliberate to be imagined. The stories came back then, the tales whispered around the fire back in her village. King Corvin, the dark alpha, cursed to take the form of a beast when night fell. A monster that prowled the castle halls, hungering for blood, chained only by his throne and his crown. Malin sat curled on her straw bed until footsteps approached outside her door. The iron latch lifted, and Hestia appeared again holding a small bundle. "The king demands stories." Malin blinked. "Stories? Your tongue is all you have, girl. Best you learn to wield it well. If he grows restless, he feeds." Hestia set the bundle down, a worn cloak to keep her warm, and a candle stub for light. "When the guard comes for you, follow without question. Speak when spoken to. Survive the night, and perhaps tomorrow will come." Then she was gone, leaving Malin with nothing but her pounding heart and the distant bone-deep growl of something far larger than a man echoing through the fortress halls. When the guard arrived, Malin's hands shook as she held the candle before her. They led her down passageways, darker than the night outside, where the torchlight flickered as if recoiling from unseen presences. The great hall was transformed. Shadows writhed across the walls, and at its center stood the king. But this was no man draped in furs. His form was half-shifted, twisted between wolf and shadow eyes blazing silver in the darkness. Malin faltered, breath caught in her throat. "Speak!" The beast growled, the sound rattling the very stones. She forced air into her lungs, forced words past her trembling lips. And so, she told him a story. One from her childhood of a girl who lost her way in the forest, but followed the song of the moon to find her home. Her voice wavered at first, but as she continued, the hall grew still. The beast listened. When she finished, silence stretched long. Then a low, rumbling laugh rolled through the shadows. Powerless Corvin murmured again, but this time there was something else in his tone. Not contempt, not yet mercy, but curiosity. He waved a clawed hand. "Enough. Take her away." As the guards escorted her back to her chamber, Malin realized her knees were weak, her body trembling. But she was alive. For tonight at least she had survived. And in the hollow silence of her room, she understood the only weapon she had was her voice. And as long as the cursed king demanded stories, she would weave them like shields against the darkness. Days bled into nights, and nights into something darker still. Malin quickly learned that the fortress of the Dark Alpha was not ruled by the turning of the sun, but by the pulse of his curse. By day, the halls were eerily quiet, patrolled only by guards who spoke in clipped whispers. At night, the air thickened with growls and the scrape of claws, as if the castle itself had teeth. Her role became clear. Each evening she was fetched by a guard and led into the shadowed hall where King Corvin awaited in his monstrous half-shifted form. She was to tell him stories until his fury ebbed into stillness, until the beast within him curled like a chained hound at her words. At first, Malin recited the tales she remembered from her village myths of star-born wolves, legends of queens who tamed rivers with a single glance, parables whispered to children who feared the dark. She clung to them like lifelines. Her voice was thin, uncertain, yet it filled the vast space with a fragile music. Corvin listened. Sometimes he prowled the edges of the torchlight, his claws leaving gouges in the flagstones. Sometimes he sprawled upon the throne, massive shoulders, hunched silver eyes gleaming. Never did he interrupt, save for the occasional low rumble of approval or displeasure that made her heart stutter in her chest. One night, when her memory failed her, she faltered mid-sentence. Her tongue felt heavy, her chest constricted with panic. Silence crashed over the hall like a wave. The king rose. His form loomed a silhouette of horned shadow and fur teeth glinting in the flicker of torchlight. "Have you nothing more powerless, girl?" His voice was smoke and thunder, every syllable a threat. Malin's knees buckled, but something inside her, a shard of stubbornness long buried, flared to life. She swallowed hard and whispered, "Then I will invent one." And she did. With no map to follow, she spun a tale from her own heart of a bird born with broken wings, who sang so sweetly that even the fiercest predator stilled to listen. Her words shook, but she forced them onward, weaving images of skies the bird could never reach, yet still claimed with song. When she dared glance up, she found the beast's frozen eyes burning with something unreadable. The hall echoed with his ragged breath. At last he sat heavily upon the throne again, his claws curling around the armrests. "You will continue," he said. Not a command laced with rage this time, but something softer, as if curiosity had edged out hunger. From then on, Malin told not only the old stories, but those she invented. She found that her imagination, once a secret comfort in her years of isolation, became her shield. The beast demanded more each night, longer tales, darker ones where courage was a fragile spark, but still burned bright against despair. And with every word she noticed something shift. His growls lessened. His claws raked the stones less often. The silver blaze in his eyes dimmed from fury to contemplation. Sometimes when she faltered, he would prompt her with a single word, and then, as though he feared the silence more than the story's end. By day, Malin's world was narrower. Mistress Hestia set her to tasks mending linens, sweeping floors, fetching herbs for the kitchens. Other servants avoided her, crossing themselves when she passed. To them she was not one of them, but a chosen offering to the beast. Her survival was seen not as fortune, but as some unnatural defiance of fate. Yet even in her solitude she began to notice fragments of humanity woven into the fortress. The faint scent of ink in an abandoned study, the way sunlight slipped through arrow-slit windows, touching dust motes like gold, the half-heard notes of a lute once drifting from a distant chamber before silenced. It made her wonder, was Corvin truly only a beast of night, or was there a man buried beneath the curse? Her question was half answered weeks later. She had been escorted to the hall as usual, candle trembling in her hand, when the guard halted abruptly. "Wait." The door groaned open, and inside the shadows stirred. But instead of the monstrous figure she had come to expect, a man sat upon the throne, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that gleamed like ink in the torchlight. His face was carved with sharp planes, his mouth stern, his gaze heavy with something both regal and weary. Only his eyes betrayed the truth, those same silver flames, though now tempered by human shape. Malin froze. Corvin regarded her in silence, then said, "You look disappointed." Her breath caught. "I thought you would be the beast." He tilted his head. "And yet here I sit still cursed, still no less a monster. Is that what you see?" Malin's throat tightened. She remembered the tales her people told, the horrors, the slaughter. But she also remembered the stillness with which he had listened, the restraint in his claws when he might have torn her apart. "I see. A king who listens," she said quietly. For the first time, his lips curved. Not into a smile, but something close, fragile as dawn. After that night, things changed. Sometimes she was summoned to the beast, other times to the man. Both demanded stories, but in different ways. The beast craved distraction from hunger. The man seemed to seek something else, solace perhaps, or a mirror to reflect what humanity remained within him. Malin began to weave her tales more carefully. To the beast she spoke of battles and courage of fire against darkness. To the man she spoke of forgiveness of broken things that could still mend, of love that outlasted ruin. And though fear still clung to her, another feeling began to grow strange, impossible, but undeniable. Curiosity. Late one evening, after a story that left silence hanging heavy between them, Corvin leaned forward on the throne. His voice was low, roughened by something she could not name. "Why do you not tremble like the others?" he asked. Malin's hands twisted in her lap. "I do tremble, my lord. Only I have been powerless all my life. Fear has long been my shadow. Here before you it is no different. Perhaps I have simply grown used to it." He studied her silver eyes burning. "No," he murmured. "It is different. You look at me and see more than claws and fangs, and that is dangerous." For a moment, Malin thought he might dismiss her. Instead, he said, "Tomorrow night you will come again, and bring me a story not of others, but of yourself." Her heart lurched. To bare her soul before the cursed king was unthinkable, yet to refuse was death. So Malin bowed her head. "As you command." But inside something stirred, a flicker of hope or doom. She could not yet tell which. The next night came too swiftly. Malin paced the length of her small chamber, palms, damp heart pounding. Hestia had said nothing unusual when she fetched her a simple, "The king awaits." Yet the weight of his command from the night before pressed on Malin like a chain around her throat. He had asked not for legend, not for invention, but for truth. And truth was a dangerous thing in these halls. Still, when the guard opened the heavy doors, she stepped inside. Corvin sat waiting on the throne. This night it was the man who greeted her, not the beast. His dark hair caught the torchlight, his shoulders draped in a mantle of black fur. Only his eyes betrayed him, the silver glow of his curse watching her with unblinking intensity. "Tell me," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. Malin drew in a breath. She had told countless stories by now, had spun whole worlds from fragments of memory. Yet her own story had always been the one she kept buried. To speak it aloud was to expose her wounds, and wounds once seen could be cut deeper. But his gaze left no escape. so she began. She told him of her childhood, of a family that had looked upon her as a blemish on their bloodline, born to a shifter clan yet powerless to take a wolf form, a defect, a curse. When other children howled beneath the full moon, her throat had been silent. When their eyes gleamed with the fire of the hunt, hers had remained dull. Her father had called her useless. Her mother had avoided her eyes. And when the village elders declared her barren, a girl who could never bear pups, she had ceased to be seen as even human. She became a burden, a mouth to feed, a shame to hide. I learned early that silence was safer, she said, voice trembling, that if I made myself small, perhaps their disappointment would not weigh so heavily. Corvin did not move. His face was carved stone, unreadable, yet his eyes burned with something that made her breath falter, and yet she continued. I found refuge in stories. When I could not run with the others, I imagined running across endless fields. When I could not shift, I dreamed of wings. The worlds I created were the only places where I was not powerless. She lowered her gaze, shame clawing at her. Until Garrick came. Until my father gave me away for a sack of coin, and the promise he would never see me again. Her voice cracked then, and she pressed her lips shut, wishing she could swallow the words back. The silence stretched. The hall seemed to breathe with it. Then Corvin rose from the throne. He descended the steps slowly, each movement deliberate. Malin shrank back, every instinct screaming at her to flee, though there was nowhere to run. When he stopped before her, the shadows clung to him like a second skin. His hand lifted, not claws, not fangs, only a hand. He touched her chin, tilting her face upward until she was forced to meet those burning eyes. They cast you aside because they feared what you were not, he said softly. Yet here you stand before me, and you are unbroken. Tears threatened to spill. I am broken, she whispered. For a moment something flickered in his gaze. Then perhaps he murmured, We are alike. That night he did not demand another story. He simply turned away and dismissed the guards, leaving her to walk back through the labyrinth of corridors with her chest tight and her thoughts in disarray. She had seen something in him, not only the beast, not only the king, but a mirror. And that terrified her more than claws ever could. Days passed. She told more stories, sometimes of herself, sometimes of invented worlds. Each time she saw Corvin listening differently now, less like a predator waiting for distraction, more like a man desperate for something he had long forgotten. And yet the castle itself seemed restless. Whispers carried on the draught through the servant halls of movement at the borders of rival clans, stirring of enemies emboldened by the king's curse. Malin caught fragments of conversations. How long could a ruler hold loyalty when his people feared him more than they revered him? Hestia offered no answers. When Malin asked the older woman, only said, The crown is heavy, child, and wolves are always waiting to tear it from the head that wears it. One evening, as Malin prepared to be led once more into the hall, she caught sight of Corvin from afar. He stood on a high balcony overlooking the courtyard, clad in armor, dark as midnight, speaking to Garrick and another commander. Torches below revealed the tense set of his shoulders, the clenched line of his jaw. For the first time she saw not a beast nor a cursed king, but a man bearing the weight of a kingdom unraveling beneath him. and she wondered, was she merely a distraction from his torment, or had her stories begun to matter in ways neither of them yet understood? That night when he summoned her, the beast was waiting again. Larger, fiercer eyes blazing with hunger. The growl that shook the walls seemed more violent than ever, as if he fought not only himself, but the mounting storm outside his castle walls. Malin's hands shook as she began her tale. She spoke of a ship lost at sea, of a captain who fought against storms greater than any man could withstand, of a fragile light that guided him home. The beast roared midway through shadows, thrashing, but she did not falter. Her voice rose firm and steady until the whole grew still. When silence finally fell, the beast slumped forward, panting, and for the briefest instant she thought she saw sorrow flicker in those silver eyes. Later, when the guards led her back, Malin pressed her hand to her chest. Her heart hammered not with terror, but with something far more dangerous empathy. She had survived another night. But survival no longer felt like enough. She wanted to understand him. And perhaps in some treacherous corner of her soul, she wanted him to understand her too. The first sign came not as a roar of war, but as silence. One morning Malin woke to find the fortress unsettled. The guards were tense armor clinking in hurried rhythm. Messengers ran through corridors like veins pumping blood too quickly. Even Mistress Hestia, who never allowed worry to show, had lines carved deeper around her eyes. "What has happened?" Malin asked as Hestia thrust a tray into her hands. "The border clans grow restless," Hestia said curtly. "Scouts have vanished. Smoke rises from villages sworn to the crown. Whispers say enemies test the Dark Alpha's strength, hoping to find him weakened." Malin's heart tightened. She had heard such whispers before in her own village, that a king cursed to spend half his life as a beast could not truly protect his people. That fear was not the same as loyalty, and sooner or later fear turned to rebellion. That night, she was summoned earlier than usual. The hall was lit brighter torches, flaring as if to chase shadows from corners where conspiracies might lurk. Corvin sat upon the throne in his human form, clad in armor so black it seemed forged from midnight. Garrick stood beside him, expression grim. When Malin entered, both men turned toward her. She felt suddenly small beneath their gaze, as if her simple tunic marked her as something fragile in a world of steel. "Leave us," Corvin ordered. Garrick hesitated, then bowed and withdrew, the king's silver eyes fixed upon her. "Tonight I do not ask for a story," he said. His voice was quiet, yet the weight of it pressed on her like stone. "I ask for truth." Malin's mouth went dry. "What truth? You were cast out by your people. You know their hearts, their weakness, their cruelty. Tell me, Malin, if I falter, if my curse consumes me, will they tear this kingdom apart?" The question startled her. He was the Dark Alpha, the monster of legend. Yet here he sat asking her not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a man stripped bare by uncertainty. She swallowed hard. "Yes," she whispered. "They will tear it apart. Fear cannot hold forever. Not without hope." A flicker crossed his face, something sharp as pain. He rose abruptly, pacing before the throne. "Hope," he muttered. "A fragile thing, and yet you speak as if it were stronger than claws." Malin dared to meet his gaze. "Sometimes it is." For a long moment silence stretched. Then Corvin drew a long breath. So be it. Stay, girl. The night grows long and I feel the curse stirring. When the beast rises, speak to me, bind me with your words. If I break, if I lose control, it will not be only my kingdom that falls. The gravity of his plea left her trembling, but she bowed her head. I will try. The transformation came like a storm. One moment he stood as a man, the next his body shuddered bones, twisting fur, erupting claws, slicing the air. His roar shook the hall, rattling the torches. The beast crouched low, eyes ablaze, saliva hissing against the stone floor. Malin forced herself not to retreat. Her voice shook at first, but she spoke of wolves running beneath moonlight, of loyalty that outlasted hunger, of bonds forged in darkness. Her words spun like fragile threads weaving across the fury before her. The beast thrashed claws, carving deep gouges, but he did not strike. He listened. His ragged breath slowed, his growls softened. At last he slumped back, chained by her story, as surely as if iron bound him. When the silence came, Malin's body gave way, and she collapsed onto her knees, trembling with exhaustion. The days that followed brought no reprieve. Scouts returned with reports of raiders at the borders, villages burned, and whispers of betrayal among Corvin's own lords. One evening, Malin overheard Garrick speaking sharply in the corridor outside her chamber. "The council grows restless," he said. "They question your judgment, my king. They say the beast rules you more than you rule it. They speak of replacing you. Replacing me." Corvin's voice was steel. With another Alpha, Garrick said reluctantly, "One not bound by a curse. They say it is only a matter of time before we all fall." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Malin pressed her hand to her mouth, hardly daring to breathe. That night, when Corvin summoned her, he looked more tired than she had ever seen him. His armor was gone, replaced by a simple tunic, yet the weight he carried seemed greater than any chainmail. "Tell me a story of loyalty," he said, voice rough, "one that does not break beneath fear." So Malin told him of a warrior who followed her captain into battle, even when the rest had fled, of how loyalty was not forged in victory, but in the willingness to stand when defeat loomed. As she spoke, she saw his expression soften, if only a fraction. When she finished, he leaned forward. "And you, Malin, do you speak of loyalty because you have known it or because you long for it?" Her throat tightened. "Because I have never known it," she confessed. "But I still believe it exists." Corvin's gaze lingered on her, searching, piercing, as if he sought not just her words but her soul. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. "Perhaps," he murmured, "you are the only one in this kingdom who still does." Outside, the storm gathered. The night patrols doubled. The scent of blood lingered faintly in the air. Malin knew the fragile sanctuary she had found in her stories was nearing its end. The world beyond the fortress walls was closing in, and soon no tale she told would be enough to hold it back. And still, in the quiet space between words, she felt the unspoken truth growing between them. She had come to the Dark Alpha's hall, powerless, abandoned, nothing more than a discarded offering. Yet now, when he looked at her, she no longer saw only hunger in his silver eyes. She saw need, and perhaps, just perhaps, hope. The sun's lower rim touched the rooftops like a blade dipped in blood, and the square erupted. Steel clashed on cobblestone. Baron's men tore away their disguises, mercenaries in polished mail eyes painted with ash, their formation tight as a clenched fist. Villagers screamed, scattering, tripping over baskets and benches as the dais became a storm's eye. Corvin Rowe's cloak shredded silver fire erupting in his gaze. The curse surged too quickly, this time his body jerking, spine cracking with the shift. The beast clawed at his skin, eager to tear free, to devour every traitor in reach. Malin, still on the dais, seized his arm. "Corvin," she shouted above the din. "Hold! Don't lose yourself now!" His head snapped toward her. Half beast, half man. His face was fury carved in flesh. For one terrible moment, she thought he would strike her down with the rest. Then her voice cut through thin but unbroken. "Your people are watching. Give them the truth you promised." The words tethered him like chains. With a guttural snarl, Corvin forced the change to halt midway, towering monstrous, yet still recognizably their king. A hush rippled through the square despite the chaos. The crowd saw the beast, yes, but they also saw him choose restraint. Garrick's sword flashed as he carved a path through Baron's men. To the king he bellowed his call taken up by loyal guards. Wolves leapt from the shadows of alleyways, pack brothers answering without hesitation. The air filled with fur fangs and the sharp tang of blood. Baron's daughter shrieked, flinging aside her jeweled veil. "Slaughter them all. The throne is ours by right." Malin stared, shock freezing her. This was no reluctant bride, but a conspirator. The ambush was not merely Baron's ambition, it was a coup dressed as ceremony. An arrow whistled toward her chest. Corvin moved faster than thought, his clawed hand seizing the shaft mid-air. He crushed it in his fist, splinters raining down. His silver eyes blazed as he loomed over her. "Stay behind me!" But Malin shook her head. "No. If you lose yourself, if the beast takes everything, who will speak you back?" He bared his fangs, a sound between a growl and a laugh. "Then stay close, little flame." The fight spilled through the square. Villagers fled to doorways and rooftops, yet some did not run. A blacksmith hefted his hammer. A baker's son swung a broken pole. Hope is fragile, Malin thought, but when lit it spreads faster than fire. Corvin tore through mercenaries, his claws shearing shields, his roar scattering men like frightened crows. But for every traitor he struck down two more pressed in. The beast inside him strained for release, hungry to end the fight in one devastating frenzy. Malin's voice rose, trembling but loud. "Remember who you are. Not curse, not fear, king." Her words lanced through the uproar. Villagers who had never spoken his name without trembling now echoed her cry. "King! King!" The chant swelled. For the first time, Corvin fought not as a shadow in the dark, but beneath the eyes of his people, and they did not look away. Baron himself stepped forward, blade-drawn sneer cutting his face. "Monster!" he spat. "You should have taken my leash when offered. Now I break you before their eyes." Corvin straightened to his full height, half beast, half man, yet wholly sovereign. "You mistake me, Baron. I was never yours to leash." Their swords clashed fang against steel, claw against treachery. Sparks leapt, screams folded into the roar of battle. Malin could barely breathe, yet she knew this moment mattered more than any story she had ever told. She gathered her courage, lifted her voice, and wove a tale into the chaos of a king who bore his curse like armor, who chose his people over power, who stood against betrayal not with chains, but with will. Her words spread across the square like smoke curling into ears, seeding belief, and the people believed. When Corvin struck Beren down at last, blade wrenched from the traitor's hand, claws at his throat, the square did not recoil in fear. They roared their approval, a thunder that shook the stones. Beren's daughter was dragged screaming from the dais, her jeweled gown torn as peasants spat at her feet. The coup crumbled as quickly as it had risen. Night bled across the sky. Fire's gutted wounds were bound, and the dead were mourned. Corvin stood upon the dais bloodied, trembling at the edge of full transformation. Malin pressed herself to his side, her hand at his chest. "It's over," she whispered. "They see you now, not as curse, but as king." His breath came ragged animal. "And you, Malin, what do you see?" She lifted her gaze unflinching. "I see the man who chose me when no one else did. I see the king who listens when even monsters would not." For the first time his claws withdrew fur sliding back into flesh. He was only Corvin again. Tired, scarred, but more king than he had ever been. The people knelt not out of fear, but reverence. Their monster, their sovereign, their hope. And beside him stood Malin, the powerless girl, abandoned by all now, the voice that bound a kingdom together. Yet even as triumph hummed in the air, Malin knew the story was not done. Hope had been kindled, yes, but hope is fragile, and enemies beyond the borders would not rest while Corvin's throne still stood. Still, for this night at least, she let herself believe in the impossible, that words could save a kingdom, and love might save a cursed king. The council chamber smelled of wax and iron. Every candle guttered in the draught, but none dared speak above a whisper until Corvin entered. He walked as though every eye were a chain across his shoulders. Yet when Malin followed, the air shifted. Whispers paused, heads turned. The powerless girl who had once been left to rot now walked at the dark Alpha's side. "Rise, Corvin," said his voice, carrying without strain. "You have seen treachery undone. You have seen me in my curse. You know the truth. Now you must see the crown placed in the light." The lords bowed, some eagerly, some begrudgingly, but all bowed. Malin stood very still, the memory of the square's chaos echoing in her ribs. She thought of the arrows that had fallen like black rain, of the beast that had crouched over her and not torn her apart. She thought of the moment she had stood in front of him, not because she was strong, but because no one else had. Corvin reached for her hand. It was not rehearsed, not planned. His palm was scarred, calloused, burning faintly, as if some ember of his curse still lingered beneath his skin. "Stand with me," he said low enough that only she heard. The coronation was called at dawn. The city gathered not with pomp, but with hunger for certainty, for hope. Priests laid out the relics of the realm, the iron circlet, the oath sword, the banner whose edges were frayed by generations. Corvin knelt, but when the high priest approached, he lifted his hand. "This crown is not mine alone," he said. Then he turned, and every gaze followed him to Malin. The one who held me when I would have surrendered to the beast, the one abandoned yet unbroken, will kneel beside me. She is queen by right of truth, not of blood. A ripple ran through the crowd like a storm over wheat. Malin's throat closed, but she sank to her knees. The iron circlet touched Corvin's head, then hers. The oath sword crossed their joined hands. When the banners lifted, the roar that rose from the city was not fear, it was allegiance. That night, for the first time, the curse came differently. Shadows gathered, yes, and his body fought itself, but where once had been a tearing agony, there was resistance as if another will pressed back. Malin's voice wove through the chamber, no longer only stories, but vows of loyalty, of love, of shared burden. Corvin's claws shrank back into hands. His eyes, golden and feral, softened to the grey of stormlight after rain. The beast fell away, leaving the man entire. He looked at her as if seeing sunrise for the first time. It was never the curse, he whispered. It was the solitude. Her palm touched his cheek, and solitude breaks when two choose each other. The kingdom woke to bells. The people gathered in streets to see their king walk unveiled, his hand entwined with his queen's. Whispers spread faster than fire in dry fields that the beast was gone, that love had undone what steel could not, that the powerless girl had become the strongest bond in the realm. Seasons would bring new threats, new lords, new battles. But that morning, for the first time in living memory, the city's walls rang not with fear, but with songs. And at the heart of it all stood Malin, once cast aside, now crowned not only by iron, but by the choice of every soul who believed in her.